I found out my nephew was trying to steal my house on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, while eating a tuna sandwich at my kitchen table and watching the gulls fight over scraps on the beach below. The phone call came from Marcus Chen, a real estate agent I'd never heard of, asking if I was still interested in selling the oceanfront property at 847 Pelican Way. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. There was a long, awkward pause before he apologized profusely and hung up. But something about that call stuck in my gut like a fish bone. I'd lived in this house for 37 years, ever since Margaret and I bought it in 1986 for $82,000. The idea that someone was out there discussing my home, my life, without my knowledge made my hands shake as I set down my sandwich. I'm 74 years old, and I'll admit my mind isn't quite as sharp as it used to be. Sometimes I forget where I put my reading glasses, or I'll walk into a room and forget why I went there. But I'm not senile. I'm not confused. And I damn sure know when someone's trying to take advantage of me. The next morning, my nephew Derek showed up unannounced. That should have been my first real warning sign. Derek's 36, works in commercial real estate development, and usually only visits during major holidays when his mother, my sister Linda, guilts him into it. But there he was at 9 in the morning, climbing out of his silver BMW with a briefcase and a concerned expression that looked about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Uncle Raymond," he said, giving me a hug that felt more like a business transaction than a family greeting. "I've been worried about you. You look tired. Are you eating enough?" I'd seen myself in the mirror that morning. I looked the same as I always did, just older, grayer, a bit more weathered by the salt air and time. But I played along. "I'm fine, Derek. What brings you out here on a Wednesday morning? Shouldn't you be at work?" He walked past me into the house, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood floors. Margaret and I had refinished ourselves back in 1994. "That's actually why I'm here, Uncle Ray. I wanted to talk to you about this place. About your future." My future. The way he said it made it sound like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to topple over at any moment. We sat in the living room, the same room where Margaret and I had watched 1,000 sunsets through the picture window, where we'd celebrated Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday afternoons. Derek opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Uncle Ray, I've been doing some thinking," he began, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, like he was about to deliver bad news about a terminal illness. "This house is getting old. You're getting older. I'm worried about you being out here all alone, so far from family, dealing with all the maintenance and repairs that come with an oceanfront property." "I manage just fine," I said, though I felt my defenses rising like the tide outside my window. "Do you though?" He pulled out a photograph from his folder. It showed the south side of my house, where some of the paint had started to peel near the foundation. "Look at this. The wood siding is deteriorating. And that's just what's visible from the outside." He spread more photos across my coffee table like he was presenting evidence in a courtroom. Close-ups of the roof shingles, the deck railing, a crack in the driveway. "I had a buddy of mine who's a contractor drive by and take a look. He says you're probably looking at $70,000, maybe $80,000 in repairs. Minimum." The number hit me like a wave. $80,000. I lived on a fixed income, my pension from 30 years at the Postal Service and Social Security. I had some savings, maybe $40,000, but that was supposed to last me the rest of my life. Derek must have seen the panic in my eyes because he softened his voice, reaching over to pat my hand. "I know it's overwhelming. That's why I've been talking to some people, and I think I have a solution. What if you sold this place? You could move into a nice assisted living facility, somewhere with people around, activities, medical care on site. No more worrying about repairs or being alone out here." "I don't need assisted living," I said, pulling my hand away. "I'm 74, not 94. I know. But think about it practically. This house is worth, what, maybe $300,000 in its current condition? With all these repairs needed, you'd be lucky to get $250,000. But I've been talking to some investors, and I think I could get you $220,000, cash, quick sale. You'd have enough to pay for a really nice place, and you wouldn't have to deal with the stress of listing it, showing it, all that hassle. $220,000. For a house on one of the most desirable beaches in coastal Maine. Even with my occasionally foggy memory, I knew that number was wrong. Dead wrong. I need to think about it, I said. Derek's smile tightened just slightly. Of course. But don't think too long, Uncle Ray. The foundation issues especially, they get worse fast. And you know how expensive everything gets as you wait. That $80,000 could easily become $150,000 if you let it go. After he left, I stood at my window and watched the ocean for a long time. The water was grey-green under the cloudy sky, whitecaps rolling in with the afternoon wind. Margaret used to say that the ocean was honest, that it never pretended to be anything other than what it was. It could be calm and beautiful, or it could be violent and destructive, but it never lied about its nature. I wished she was here. She would have known what to do. She always did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Derek's photos, about the peeling paint and the crack in the driveway. In the darkness, they seemed more ominous, more urgent. What if he was right? What if I was being stubborn and stupid, clinging to a house I couldn't afford to maintain? But something bothered me. That phone call from Marcus Chen. The timing was too coincidental. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Bill Patterson. Bill's 68, a retired contractor who'd lived 3 houses down for 20 years. If anyone would know about the condition of my house, it would be Bill. Hey Ray, he answered on the second ring. What's up? Bill, I need your honest opinion. How does my house look to you? Structurally, I mean. There was a pause. Your house. Ray, your house is solid as a rock. I walked past it just yesterday. Why are you asking? I explained about Derek's visit, about the photos and the dire warnings about foundation issues and $80,000 in repairs. Bill was quiet for a moment, then he said, Ray, I think you need to get a real inspector out there. Not your nephew's buddy. An actual licensed home inspector who works for you, not for someone trying to buy your property. The suspicion that had been growing in my gut suddenly bloomed into full certainty. You think he's lying? I think you should get a second opinion. I called 3 different home inspection companies that afternoon. The first 2 couldn't come out for 2 weeks, but the third, a woman named Patricia Alvarez, said she had a cancellation and could come the next day. Derek called me that evening. Uncle Ray, I've been thinking about our conversation. I talked to my investors, and I think I can push them up to $230,000. But they need an answer by Monday. This is really the best offer you're going to get, especially with the condition of the place. I need more time, I said. His voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. Time for what? Uncle Ray, you're not getting any younger. Neither is that house. Every day you wait, it's costing you money. I said I need more time. I hung up before he could respond. Patricia Alvarez arrived at 8 the next morning in a white van with her company logo on the side. She was maybe 50, with grey streaks in her black hair and the no-nonsense air of someone who'd spent decades dealing with people trying to hide problems with their houses. She spent 4 hours going over every inch of my property. She crawled into the crawl space under the house, climbed onto the roof, checked every window, every door, every pipe and wire. I made coffee and watched her work, my anxiety building with each passing minute. Finally, she came back inside, pulling off her work gloves and accepting the mug of coffee I offered. Mr. Brennan, she said, I'm going to be straight with you. Whoever told you this house needs $80,000 in repairs was either incompetent or lying. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I had to sit down. She pulled out her tablet and showed me photos. Yes, you've got some paint peeling on the south side. That's about a $1,500 job. Your roof has another 5, maybe 7 years left on it. That'll be $12,000 to $15,000 when the time comes, but it's not urgent. The foundation is absolutely solid. No cracks, no settling, no water damage. Your electrical panel is old but functioning, your plumbing is good, your deck could use some restaining but that's cosmetic. So how much? I asked. Total? If you wanted to address everything I noted, including things that are purely cosmetic like that driveway crack, you're looking at maybe $10,000 over the next year. And that's if you wanted to be really proactive about it. Honestly, This house is in excellent condition for its age. I felt something hot building behind my eyes. Anger. Pure, righteous anger. Mr. Brennan, has someone been pressuring you to sell? Patricia asked gently. I told her everything. About Derek, about the photos, about the $230,000 offer. Her expression hardened. Mr. Brennan, I can't tell you what to do with your property. But I can tell you that oceanfront properties in this area are selling for between $600,000 and $800,000, depending on the lot size and condition. A house like yours, in this location, in this condition, you could easily get $700,000, probably more. $700,000. Derek had been trying to steal $500,000 from me. My nephew. My sister Linda's son. The boy I'd taught to fish when he was 8 years old, whose college graduation I'd attended, who'd called me Uncle Ray with what I'd thought was genuine affection. Patricia handed me her card. If you decide to sell, I know several reputable real estate agents. People who will actually look out for your interests. After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, looking at Margaret's picture on the mantel. She was smiling in that photo, taken on this very beach 20 years ago, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes bright with life and joy. What do I do, Maggie? I whispered. But I already knew what I had to do. I called Derek. I've made my decision, I said when he answered. I'm not selling. Not to you, not to your investors, not to anyone. There was a long silence. Then, Uncle Ray, I don't think you understand the situation. You need to sell. That house is falling apart. I had it inspected. By a real inspector. She says it's in excellent condition. Another silence, longer this time. When Derek spoke again, his voice was cold, businesslike, nothing like the concerned nephew from a few days ago. That was a mistake. You're just going to confuse yourself with conflicting information. Conflicting information? You mean the truth versus your lies? I'm trying to help you, he said, but there was no warmth in it now, no pretense of family concern. You're an old man living alone in an expensive property you can't maintain. I'm offering you a way out that benefits everyone. Everyone? Or just you and your buyers? He hung up. I should have been satisfied with that, with calling his bluff and sending him away. But I couldn't let it go. The betrayal burned too hot, too deep. I'd changed this boy's diapers when Linda had to work double shifts. I'd given him $5,000 when he'd needed a down payment on his first car. I'd been family to him, and he'd tried to rob me blind. I called Patricia Alvarez back. Those real estate agents you mentioned. Can I get their names? She gave me 3 contacts. I called the first one, a woman named Jennifer Torres who specialized in oceanfront properties. Within an hour, she was at my house, looking at the property with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly what it was worth. Mr. Brennan, she said, standing on my deck and looking out at the water, I could list this for $750,000. I think we'd get it. What if I told you I didn't want to list it? What if I told you I wanted to find out who was planning to buy it from my nephew, and for how much? Jennifer looked at me with new interest. This sounds like a story. I told her everything. About Derek, about the fake repairs, about the $230,000 offer. Her expression grew dark. Your nephew was going to flip this. Probably had buyers already lined up. This is fraud, Mr. Brennan. You could report him. I have something else in mind, I said. Can you do some digging? Find out who he's been talking to? Jennifer made some calls. It took 3 days, but she found them. Derek had been negotiating with a development company called Coastal Horizons LLC. They'd agreed to buy the property for $680,000, contingent on Derek securing it first. He would have made over $450,000 in profit, all by lying to his elderly uncle about imaginary repairs. What do you want to do? Jennifer asked. I thought about it. I thought about Derek's cold voice on the phone, about how quickly the mask of concern had dropped to reveal the calculating businessman underneath. I thought about Margaret, about the life we'd built in this house, about the sunrise we'd watched from this deck and the storms we'd weathered together. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I want to sell, I said. But not to Derek's buyers. Find me someone else. Someone who'll actually appreciate what this place means. Jennifer smiled. I think I know just the people. The answer came from somewhere I never expected. The Coastal Marine Conservation Alliance, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting Maine's ocean ecosystems and marine life. They'd been looking for a property to establish a research station and education center, somewhere they could bring students and researchers, somewhere they could study the changing ocean and teach people about conservation. They offered me $600,000. More importantly, they offered me something Derek's developers never could, a promise that this house, this beach, this piece of Margaret's and my life together would never be turned into condos or vacation rentals or tourist traps. It would remain a place where people came to learn, to appreciate, to protect. I accepted their offer on a Friday afternoon in late October. The ocean was steel grey under autumn skies, the air sharp with the promise of winter. Derek found out 3 days later. He showed up at my house unannounced again, but this time there was no pretense of concern, no briefcase full of fake evidence. You sold it to a charity? His face was red, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know how much money you just cost me? About $450,000, I said calmly. I know exactly how much. Those were my buyers. I had a deal in place. You had a deal to defraud your uncle. That's what you had. He stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. But he just pointed his finger at my face, trembling with anger. You're going to regret this. You're a foolish old man, and you just threw away the best offer you were ever going to get. Get off my property, I said quietly. And don't come back. He left, tires squealing as he pulled out of my driveway. I never saw him again. Linda called a week later, crying, apologizing for her son, saying she had no idea what he'd been planning. I believed her. Derek had kept his scheme carefully hidden, probably knowing his mother would have stopped him if she'd known. The sale closed in December. On my last day in the house, I walked through each room one final time, remembering. The kitchen where Margaret had made countless meals. The bedroom where we'd slept for 37 years. The deck where we'd watched the sun rise and set over the endless ocean. The Conservation Alliance had agreed to let me visit whenever I wanted. They were even naming one of their research rooms after Margaret, a small plaque that would read the Margaret Brennan Oceanography Lab. I bought a small cottage 10 miles inland, close to Linda and my other nieces and nephews, the ones who actually loved me. It's comfortable, manageable, with a garden where I'm learning to grow tomatoes and a front porch where I can sit in the evenings. But once a month, I drive back to 847 Pelican Way. I park in the visitor lot and walk down to the beach. The house looks different now, with the Alliance's logo on a sign out front, with students and researchers coming and going, with purpose and life filling its rooms. But the ocean is the same. Still honest, still beautiful, still teaching anyone who'll listen about the truth of things. Last week, I visited on a Tuesday. A young woman, maybe 25, was out on the deck with a laptop, studying something on her screen. She saw me watching and waved. "Are you Ray?" she called down. "I am. I've heard about you. Your wife Margaret, too. They told us what you did, selling this place to the Alliance instead of to developers. It was really special." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and walked down to the water's edge. The gulls were fighting over scraps again, their cries sharp in the salt air. The waves rolled in, constant and eternal, exactly as they'd been doing for millions of years and would keep doing for millions more. I thought about Derek, about his anger and his greed, about how he'd been willing to betray family for money. I didn't hate him. I just felt sad for him, for someone who'd lost sight of what really mattered. Margaret always said the ocean taught you to see clearly, if you paid attention. It taught you what was temporary and what was permanent, what was true and what was illusion. I'd learned that lesson well. As I turned to head back to my car, I took one last look at the house. Through the picture window, I could see people inside, working, learning, protecting the ocean Margaret and I had loved for so many years. Derek had been right about one thing. I wasn't getting any younger. None of us were. But I'd spent my time well. I'd protected something that mattered. I'd made sure that this place would continue to mean something long after I was gone. That was worth more than any amount of money Derek's developers could have offered. The sun was setting as I drove home, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. I smiled, thinking about Margaret, about the life we'd built, about the legacy we'd left. It had been a good day, a good life, and in the end, that's all any of us can hope for. I signed the papers that would take away my nephew's $400,000 payday on a Thursday morning in November, with rain streaking down the windows of the lawyer's office and the taste of betrayal still bitter in my mouth. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote my name, Raymond Michael Brennan, across the bottom of the sales agreement. Not from age, though I'm 74 and entitled to a shake or two. No, this tremor was from pure, crystalline satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing you've just done something that will infuriate exactly the right person. Mr. Brennan, are you certain about this? Asked Thomas Whitmore, the attorney representing the Coastal Marine Conservation Alliance. He was maybe 40, with graying temples and the careful manner of someone who'd learned not to trust elderly clients making large financial decisions. I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. The conservation easement means this property can never be developed. Not by the Alliance, not by any future owner. It will remain in its current state in perpetuity. That's exactly what I want, I said, setting down the pen with finality. Across from me sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Alliance's executive director, a woman of 52 with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that lit up when she talked about ocean conservation. Next to her was James Okonkwo, their chief operations officer, a tall man in his 30s who'd spent the last 2 weeks going over every detail of the agreement with me. Mr. Brennan, Elena said, leaning forward, I want you to know what this means to us. We've been searching for 3 years for the right property. Somewhere we could establish a permanent research station, bring in students, conduct long-term studies of coastal ecosystems. Your house, your beach, it's perfect. The protected cove, the tidal pools, the proximity to deep water, it's everything we've been hoping for. Tell me again, I said. Tell me exactly what you're going to do with it. I'd heard it before, twice already, but I wanted to hear it again. I wanted to burn it into my memory so that when Derek found out, when he inevitably showed up at my door red-faced and furious, I could recite every single detail of what I'd chosen to do instead of making him rich. James pulled out a tablet and showed me the plans. We'll convert the main house into a research facility and education center. The living room becomes a classroom and lecture hall. The kitchen stays mostly as is, but gets upgraded to accommodate visiting researchers. The bedrooms become dorm-style housing for graduate students and scientists doing fieldwork. We'll add solar panels to the roof, install water collection systems, make the whole operation as sustainable as possible. The deck, Elena added, her voice warm with enthusiasm, becomes an observation platform. We'll add weather monitoring equipment, water quality sensors. Students will be able to sit right there where you used to have your morning coffee and collect real-time data on ocean conditions, marine life, climate patterns. Where Margaret and I used to have our morning coffee, I thought but didn't say. Where we'd watched 37 years of sunrises together. And the beach? I asked. Protected, Elena said firmly. That's part of the easement agreement. No construction, no development, no commercial use. Just research and education. School groups will come to learn about marine ecosystems. We'll run programs for local kids who might never otherwise get to understand what lives in their own backyard ocean. Scientists from universities all over the country will come to study the coastline. How did you find out about this place? I asked. How did you know I was selling? Elena and James exchanged a glance. Jennifer Torres called us, James said. Your real estate agent. She thought we might be interested, given our search for a coastal property. When she told us about your situation, about your nephew trying to. He paused, clearly uncomfortable. Trying to cheat me, I finished for him. You can say it. That's what he was doing. Yes, Elena said quietly. When Jennifer told us that story, we knew we wanted to help if we could. This isn't just about acquiring property for us, Mr. Brennan. It's about preservation. It's about making sure places like this don't disappear under condos and parking lots. The irony wasn't lost on me. My nephew Derek worked in commercial real estate development. His buyers, Coastal Horizons LLC, specialized in converting oceanfront properties into luxury vacation rentals and high-end residential developments. They'd planned to tear down my house, the house Margaret and I had poured our hearts into for 37 years, and replace it with something modern and soulless and profitable. Derek had known exactly what they'd do. He just hadn't cared. Thomas Whitmore cleared his throat. If everyone's ready, we just need your signature here, Mr. Brennan, and here, and we'll initial each page. He walked me through the rest of the paperwork with methodical precision. Purchase price, $600,000. Closing date, December 15th. Conservation easement, permanent and irrevocable. When we finished, Elena reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm, warm. "Thank you," she said. "You're giving us more than property. You're giving us hope. Every year, we watch more coastline get developed, more habitat get destroyed. What you're doing here, it matters. It will matter for generations." I felt something tighten in my chest. My wife Margaret, I said, she loved the ocean. Used to say it was the most honest thing in the world, that it never pretended to be anything other than what it was. Jennifer told us about Margaret, Elena said gently. "We'd like to honor her memory, if you'd allow it. We were thinking of naming one of our research labs after her." I had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. When I could speak again, I said, "She would have liked that. She would have liked all of this." We shook hands all around. Thomas gave me copies of everything for my records. Elena and James promised to keep me updated on the renovation plans and invited me to the opening ceremony they were planning for the following spring. As I drove home through the November rain, I thought about the phone call I'd received 3 months earlier, the one that had started all of this. Marcus Chen, a real estate agent I'd never heard of, asking if I was still interested in selling. That accidental call had unraveled Derek's entire scheme. I still didn't know if Marcus had called me by mistake, or if someone at Coastal Horizons had gotten confused about which number to dial. But that one small error had saved me from losing $500,000 and had set in motion everything that followed. The universe works in strange ways sometimes. I'd moved most of my belongings out of the beach house already, packing up 37 years of memories into boxes and taking them to my new cottage. But I'd left a few things behind for my final walkthrough, scheduled for tomorrow. Personal items I wanted to remove myself, without movers or strangers handling them. That evening, my sister Linda called. She'd been calling every few days since Derek's scheme had fallen apart, apologizing repeatedly even though none of it was her fault. "Ray, how are you doing?" Her voice was thick with concern and guilt. "I'm good, Linda. Signed the final papers today. With the conservation people?" "With the conservation people." There was a long pause. "Derek still won't talk to me," she said finally. "He says I'm taking your side over his." "You are taking my side," I said gently. "Because I'm the one who's right." "I know. I raised him better than this, Ray. I don't know where he learned to be so." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Greedy," I offered. "Dishonest. Willing to defraud his own uncle." Linda made a small sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. "All of the above. His father would be ashamed." Linda's husband Tom had died 8 years ago from a heart attack. He'd been a good man, honest and hardworking. I wondered what he would have thought of his son's attempted fraud. "How much was he going to make?" Linda asked. "About $450,000. He'd convinced buyers to pay $680,000 for the property. He was going to buy it from me for $230,000 and pocket the difference." "Oh God." Linda's voice was barely a whisper. "Ray, I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. I raised him. You raised a boy. He made himself into the man he became. That's not on you." We talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. After I hung up, I sat in my new cottage's small living room, looking at the boxes I still needed to unpack. My new place was comfortable, manageable. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen just big enough for one person who didn't do much cooking anymore. A front porch where I could sit in the evenings and watch the neighborhood kids ride their bikes up and down the street. It wasn't the ocean. But it was enough. The next morning, I drove back to 847 Pelican Way for the last time as its owner. The rain had cleared overnight, leaving the November sky scrubbed clean and bright. The ocean was that particular shade of deep blue-gray it gets in late autumn, when the water's cold enough that you can feel it just by looking at it. I let myself in with my key, breathing in the familiar smell of salt air and old wood. The house was mostly empty now. Our furniture either moved to my cottage or donated to charity. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as I walked from room to room. In the bedroom, I'd left Margaret's jewelry box on the windowsill. It was a small wooden box I'd made for her in a woodworking class back in 1989, decorated with carved seashells and sea stars. Inside were her wedding ring, the pearl necklace I'd given her for our 20th anniversary, and a pair of silver earrings she'd worn to our daughter's wedding. Our daughter. I hadn't mentioned her to Elena and James, hadn't mentioned her to Derek during any of our confrontations. Sarah had died in a car accident 19 years ago, when she was just 28. Margaret had never really recovered from losing her. I think that's what eventually took her too, 3 years ago. The doctors said it was cancer, but I knew better. It was grief, pure and simple. The kind that eats you from the inside out. I picked up the jewelry box, holding it carefully. These would go to Sarah's daughter, my granddaughter Emma, who was 12 now and living in Colorado with her father. Emma didn't remember her mother very well, had been too young when the accident happened. But she deserved to have these things, to have some physical connection to the grandmother and mother who'd loved her. In the living room, I'd left one photograph on the mantel. Margaret and me on this very beach, taken by Sarah when she was about 10 years old. We were younger then, in our 40s, still tan from summer sun. Margaret was laughing at something, her head thrown back, and I was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. Because she was. I took the photograph down, tucked it under my arm with the jewelry box. In the kitchen, I found the coffee mug I'd been looking for. It was chipped and faded, with "World's Best Grandpa" written on the side in letters that were barely legible anymore. Emma had given it to me when she was 6, had picked it out herself with her dad's help. I'd used it every morning for years. That was everything. 3 items, 37 years of memories condensed into things I could carry in my 2 hands. I walked out onto the deck one last time. The ocean stretched out forever, endless and eternal. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and lonely. The tide was coming in, waves breaking against the shore in rhythmic percussion. I hope I did right, I said aloud, to Margaret, to Sarah, to whatever might be listening. I hope this is what you would have wanted. The ocean gave me no answer. But then, it never did. That was part of its honesty. I was locking the front door when a silver BMW pulled into the driveway. Derek. He climbed out slowly, and I could see immediately that something had changed. The anger that had burned so hot when I'd last seen him was gone, replaced by something harder to read. Exhaustion, maybe. Or resignation. "Uncle Ray," he said, stopping a few feet away from me. "Derek. I heard you signed the papers yesterday." I did. He looked at the house, at the ocean beyond it, at everything he'd tried and failed to take. 600,000. Yes. I could have gotten you more. Coastal Horizons would have gone up to 700 if I'd pushed. But you weren't going to push, were you? You were going to take 230 from me and 680 from them and pocket 450 in the middle. He flinched but didn't deny it. It's called business, Uncle Ray. It's called fraud. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. A gull landed on the deck railing, cocked its head at us, then flew away. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Was the money really worth destroying your family?" Derek's face twisted into something ugly. "You don't understand. You've never understood. You and Mom, you live in this fantasy world where family matters and loyalty means something. But out in the real world, Uncle Ray, nobody gives a shit about that. It's about who's smart enough to recognize opportunities and who's willing to take them. And lying to your elderly uncle? Fabricating $80,000 in fake repairs? That's your idea of an opportunity. You weren't using it." His voice rose, frustrated. You were just sitting there in this $1 million property, living on your little pension and your social security like some kind of miser. This house was wasted on you. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they hurt, but because they revealed something I'd been trying not to see. Derek didn't feel guilty. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here because he was angry that his scheme had failed and he wanted me to know it. "You're right," I said quietly. "I wasn't using it the way you would have used it. I wasn't thinking about how much money I could extract from it or how I could leverage it into profit. I was using it to live, to remember, to honor the life I built here with Margaret and Sarah. Sarah's been dead for 19 years. I know exactly how long my daughter's been dead, Derek." Something in my voice must have finally gotten through to him because he took a step back. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did. You meant exactly that. You think because they're gone, because Margaret died and Sarah died, that this place should have died too. That I should have been eager to cash out and move on and treat their memories like they're worth whatever the market will bear. That's not what The conservation people are going to name a research lab after Margaret. Students are going to come here and learn about the ocean she loved. Scientists are going to study these waters and this coastline and maybe, if we're lucky, figure out how to protect what's left of it. That's what this place is worth, Derek. Not 600,000 or 700,000 or whatever number you want to put on it. It's worth the future it's going to create." Derek stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You're a fool, Uncle Ray. You could have been set for life. Instead, you gave it all away to some charity that's going to fill your house with strangers and turn your beach into a classroom." "You're right," I said. "I am a fool. I'm foolish enough to believe that some things matter more than money. I'm foolish enough to think that family should mean something, that honesty should mean something. I'm foolish enough to want my wife's memory honored and my daughter's love for the ocean remembered." I walked past him toward my car, the jewelry box and photograph and coffee mug still tucked under my arm. "Uncle Ray," Derek called after me. I turned back. "I hope you're happy with your decision," he said, but there was no sincerity in it, just bitterness. "I am," I said. "I really am." I drove away without looking back. The closing happened on December 15th, exactly as scheduled. Elena and James met me at Thomas Whitmore's office, and we finalized the transfer. $600,000 deposited into my account, minus fees and taxes. The deed transferred to the Coastal Marine Conservation Alliance, with the conservation easement permanently attached. Elena gave me a framed certificate, something they'd had made specially. It read, "In recognition of Raymond Brennan's extraordinary gift to ocean conservation. Because of your generosity, this coastline will remain protected in perpetuity. Future generations will learn, discover, and fall in love with the ocean in the place you called home." I hung it in my new cottage, right above the photograph of Margaret and me on the beach. Christmas came and went quietly. Linda visited, bringing cookies and apologies I no longer needed. My other nieces and nephews called, offering support and expressing shock at what Derek had tried to do. Emma video called from Colorado, wearing the pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, and it made my heart ache in the best possible way. Derek didn't call. Linda said he'd moved to Portland, taken a job with a different development company. She said he was angry, bitter, not speaking to most of the family. She said maybe someday he'd understand what he'd done wrong. I wasn't holding my breath. The Alliance started renovations in January. I drove by a few times to watch the progress. They were careful with the changes, respectful of the house's history and character. The solar panels they added to the roof were sleek and unobtrusive. The weather monitoring equipment on the deck looked like it had always been there. In March, they held a dedication ceremony. It was a cool, bright Saturday, with the kind of crystalline light you only get in early spring. Maybe 100 people showed up, students and researchers, local politicians and environmental activists, families with children eager to explore the tidal pools. Elena gave a speech about the importance of marine conservation, about the Alliance's mission, about the research they'd be conducting. Then she introduced me. I hadn't planned to say anything, had told Elena I'd just as soon watch from the back of the crowd. But she'd insisted, and now I found myself standing on the deck of my former home, looking out at all these people who'd come to celebrate something I'd done. "I'm not much for speeches," I began, and a few people laughed kindly. "But I want to tell you why I sold this place to the Alliance instead of to developers." I told them about Margaret, about how she'd loved the ocean's honesty, about Sarah, and how she'd taught Emma to look for sea glass on this beach, about 37 years of sunrises and storms, of quiet moments and joyful ones. "My nephew thought I was a fool for giving this away," I said. "Maybe I am. But if I am, then I'm a fool who believes that some things are more important than profit. I'm a fool who thinks that protecting wild places matters. I'm a fool who wants children and grandchildren, mine and everyone else's, to have somewhere they can come and learn to love the ocean the way my wife did." I paused, looking out at the water, at the endless blue-grey expanse that had been my constant companion for so many years. Margaret used to say that the ocean teaches you to see clearly if you pay attention, to know what's temporary and what's permanent, what's true and what's illusion. I've learned that lesson well. Money is temporary. Development is temporary. Even we're temporary. But the ocean, the coastline, the creatures that live here, they're as permanent as anything in this world can be. And they deserve protection. They deserve a future. When I finished, people applauded. Elena came over and hugged me, tears in her eyes. Students lined up to shake my hand, to thank me, to tell me they were excited to work at the new research station. As the ceremony ended and people dispersed to tour the facility and explore the beach, I found a quiet spot at the edge of the deck. The same spot where Margaret and I used to have our morning coffee, where we'd watched countless sunrises together. A young girl, maybe 9 or 10, came up beside me. She had a bucket in one hand, already half full of shells and sea glass. "Are you the man who used to live here?" she asked. "I am. My teacher says you're a hero. That you saved this beach." I smiled. "I wouldn't say that. I just made sure it would still be here for kids like you." She held up a piece of sea glass, pale green and worn smooth by the waves. "I'm going to keep this forever," she said with the absolute certainty only children can muster. "To remember this place." "That's a good idea," I said. She ran off to show her parents her treasure, and I stayed where I was, watching the ocean, feeling the salt breeze on my face, listening to the gulls and the waves and the sound of children discovering the wonders of the coastline. I thought about Derek, about his bitterness and his anger and his certainty that I'd made a mistake. I thought about the $450,000 he'd expected to make, the money he'd been so sure would be his. And I thought about this moment, about this little girl with her bucket of shells and her piece of sea glass, about the students inside learning about marine ecosystems, about the researchers who'd come here to study and protect the ocean. I knew which one mattered more. "I hope you can see this, Maggie," I whispered. "I hope you know what we created here. Not just a home, but a legacy. Something that will outlast both of us." The ocean offered no answer, as always. But I didn't need one. I'd done the right thing. I'd protected something that mattered. I'd made sure that this place, this piece of the world that had meant so much to Margaret and Sarah and me, would continue to mean something for generations to come. That was worth more than any amount of money Derek's developers could have paid. That was worth everything.